All right, guys, coming at you live from what is really a glorified attic space. Some of you guys might be familiar with this space, but I'm visiting family, and this is above the garage, so depressing. And you know what? I got to thinking a little bit earlier. One thing that I think we do a lot in the microphone community, and you know what? I'm definitely at fault for this too. I definitely do this a lot. We tend to categorize microphones as like definitively one tone. The SM7B is definitively dark. The Lewitt 440 is definitively bright. The Rode NZ1 is definitively mid-forward. And while there is definitely an element of truth to this, we're missing out on just a huge element of this picture. The SM7 can be a bright microphone. The Lewitt can be a dark microphone. It's all relative to the object being recorded. You know, microphones have different colorations depending on the part of the polar pattern we're in. The part of the polar pattern that the audio source is actually residing in. If I get to this side of the SM7B, my microphone is noticeably thinner because all the low end is designed to be captured from the top of the microphone. Mic position is an art. It can make or break a recording depending on how artfully we decide to mic that specific instrument. Now here is a really obvious example to highlight this, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later. What you're listening to is the SM7B moving between 4 different sound sources. Yes, it's just one guitar amp, but inside of that guitar amp is 4 10-inch speakers. As the SM7 gets closer to the sound source, the center of the speaker, it gets brighter. The result is this sort of wishy-washy, phasey, sort of 60s effect. But what's really happening is it's getting farther and closer away from 4 independent sound sources. So you're hearing a gradient of characters as the microphone moves around the sound source. We'll do a little bit more of a scientific example later, but we're going to talk about 3 things today. We're going to talk about mic position and voice and how you can change your voice to brighter or darker depending on the mic position. We're going to talk about mic position relative to guitar cabs. It's a pretty easy example to comprehend, as we just saw. And we're going to talk about mic position relative to what I call resonant chamber instruments. An example of this would be the piano or the acoustic guitar. Before we do that though, I want to talk about something really important, and that is today's sponsor, DistroKid. So DistroKid is sponsoring this whole month, and as I've said many times before, DistroKid is how you get your musical creations out there into the public eye. It is so important, and I believe in it so much as a company. As musicians, we tend to just sit on our creations and enjoy it ourselves or hate it ourselves and never get it out into the world. I said earlier this month, I hated the first video I published on this channel, but I did it anyways. And if I wouldn't have done that, if I wouldn't have published my work, I would not be talking to you right now. It's so important. So DistroKid is the most popular way to publish your music. And there's really good reason behind that. You'll get your music on every streaming platform that you could think to want. Also social media like TikTok. And they offer a load of other services besides just publishing your music. The one I want to talk about today is called Upstream. This is a really cool service that DistroKid has started. It's essentially a way to get your music in front of major labels. They call it a matchmaking service. You can submit your music for free on Upstream as long as you have DistroKid, and you just get it in front of major labels that can then look through it and see if there's any winners there. Even if they pick you, major labels aren't taking your revenue. These are really successful big labels only, like Republic Records. Can't think of a more easy and direct way in order to get your music in front of really important people that you would want to get it in front of. And again, all of this is only $20 a year. If you're interested, you can use my code here and get a percentage off and support the channel. All right, so let's get back into the art of microphone positioning. In order to do the voice part of this video, I'm going to move to a condenser microphone. I think it'll be a little bit more dramatic and more obvious. Okay, so we're using my main voiceover mic, the OC818, to talk about this. We should start off with just general good practices whenever we're using a sensitive condenser microphone, and that is to have it angled this way. You want it to be off axis so your voice goes through the microphone and you don't pick up a bunch of plosives by talking into it. You might lose a little bit of low end, but in my mind, it's worth it. This is mostly just for content creation. If you're going to be using this in a singing situation or in a voiceover situation where you can apply like a pop filter or something that isn't going to obstruct your face on camera, it's fine. Oh, and you can really notice I'm a little bit sick on this microphone compared to the SM7. Now, the main thing that is going to be a lot different on this microphone as compared to a dynamic microphone is going to be the use of proximity. Condensers are a lot more sensitive, and you can take advantage of this. That's not to say that dynamic microphones don't also have the proximity effect, but condenser microphones are a lot more sensitive, hence why you might hear a little bit more reflections in this reflective room. Now, I want to give you two examples on how I use the proximity effect to my advantage when doing a voiceover gig. Here's a snip of two different commercials, one for Status Audio and one for a knife brand called Artisan Revere. The best knives aren't made in Germany or Japan, and they certainly aren't made anywhere overseas. They're made here, in the US. The Status Between Pro earbuds were designed to be the most advanced wireless earbuds on the market. And sure, that's a little bit of fancy marketing, but what does that actually mean? You know, when it comes down to it, all of that is really just sort of marketing. These German and Japanese knife brands have had 150 plus years to fabricate this legacy. Well, it means the standard stuff like the newest Bluetooth version possible, Bluetooth 5.2. It means market-leading battery life, 12 hours in the buds and another 36 hours in the case, totaling 48 hours. That's the same microphone. The difference there is proximity. On the Status ad, I'm not eating the microphone. It's a much more natural take, and it's not treated at all. And because I'm using more or less the proper distance for talking, it sounds like my voice. Whereas the Artisan Revere ad, first off, I had just woken up, so I had a pretty gravelly voice anyways. But I'm also super close to that microphone. Combine that with the treatment I did on that vocal take, and you're left with something that sounds a lot more masculine than my actual voice does. All of this is about playing with microphone position. You can kind of trick the audience into thinking that your voice sounds more or less like your actual voice dependent on your position. And the biggest thing when it comes to voiceover would be proximity effect. So let's move on to electric guitar. Electric guitar is a really easy one to understand. Electric guitar basically works as a two-dimensional plane. The more you get into the center of the speaker, let's say you're about half an inch off, the brighter it is. The more you get off axis, the farther away you get from the sound source, and the more the sound source is in the peripheral of the polar pattern, the darker the signal. If you want to control the low end and control the proximity effect, just like we were talking about with the voice, move the microphone farther away. Farther away is going to make it a little bit more thin. Now, this varies a lot between dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. The example we're going to hear today uses the SM7. The SM7 is actually one of my favorite microphones to use on guitar cabs. We've got 4 examples I want you to pay attention to now. Center of speaker, half an inch off. Off axis from speaker, half an inch off. Center of speaker, 6 inches off. Off axis from speaker, 6 inches off. Now, after listening to that, maybe you have some preferences on which microphone position you prefer. But remember, you can start to blend these positions together by using multiple microphones. Maybe use the SM7 at the center of the guitar amp speaker, then use a large diaphragm condenser really far away, way farther than the examples I gave, maybe like 2 feet away. Blend these to taste. You get a darker signal mixed with an up-close bright signal. Best of both worlds. Now, this same method of thought applies to what I'm calling resonance chambers. I call it resonance chambers because there are a multitude of different instrumentalists on this channel, everything from acoustic guitar players to piano players. These general ideas apply to all resonant chambers instruments, although there are going to be specific techniques and positions that apply to each one of them. So mic position works in a similar way as what we were describing with the guitar amp. The difference is you don't have that two-dimensional plane to reference. Although some resonant chamber voiceover instruments like the acoustic guitar have a definitive sound source like the sound hole, many do not. The grand piano resonates through the entirety of the piano's body. A vibraphone is even more complicated. It just straight up resonates through the entire room. So suddenly with these scenarios, you're thinking way less about the individual sound source and more about positions within the room itself. Now with something like guitar, which is the example we're going to be using today, it's a little bit more obvious because you can calculate the mic position relative to the sound hole, because that's primarily where the guitar is making most of its noise. But with something like a piano, you can have multiple stereo pairs. You could have 8 microphones, all that you sum to make one holistic tone, but each individually have a far different tone. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a guitar with me here today because I'm traveling, but we're going to use a clip and analyze it from our acoustic guitar recording video. So here what you're seeing is 4 different positions of the microphone relative to my acoustic guitar. One of these is a pretty standard position, which is at the 12th fret, angled towards the sound hole, so you're not getting all that rush of air and boominess that you would get by being right on top of the sound hole. But you get some of that string detail, which adds a little bit of a bright air to it. You'll notice that when we move to another position on the guitar that is more towards the end of the body and looking towards the sound hole, that bigger side of the acoustic guitar produces more low end. So therefore, you're getting a darker tone. You can find your own position in between these two and get kind of a balance between them. Though you'll notice whenever we get closer to the sound hole, it's a bit too boomy. I would recommend not being right on top of the sound hole. I can't play like this. Look, I guess the point I'm trying to make with this video is whenever we analyze microphones, I think we're almost analyzing a little bit too much like an item with a spec sheet and numbers to be compared against other items with spec sheets and numbers, when in reality they are half the battle. The other half of the battle is how you position them relative to the sound itself, the sound source. In doing so, you are wildly changing the characteristic of the microphone. In a lot of ways, that should feel really good because you may feel like you're underpinned to a specific tone because you have a specifically bright or dark microphone, but in reality, you can get a lot of mileage out of that mic just by moving it around different positions. Be tactful with how you use your microphone. Be creative. In doing so, you're going to get so much more mileage out of the microphone that you have currently. The answer does not necessarily need to be buying something else. All right, I hope that was helpful. If you'd like, you can follow me here on Instagram. You can also work on a project with me by emailing me here at realaudiohaze@gmail.com. I will see you soon.